Well, like I said, you're going to be immediately disappointed because we had one of our members, Shane Reese, share his testimony at the first service, and he wasn't able to be here. So you're going to get a less interesting version of that as part of my remarks to you this morning. But it was an incredible testimony, and the reason we shared it today is we don't just want people to have theological ideas. Well, what does it mean? Christ the King, and 100 years ago, it was instituted to resist totalitarian tendencies in the modern political. That's all true. But in a more local matter, what does it mean to be shepherded by Christ yourself? When you say, the shepherd found me, I was one of the lost sheep, and he found me. So if you see Shane, which he probably has the most tattoos of anyone in our church, he grew up in Costa Mesa, on the border of Costa Mesa, Newport. And his father was a biker and a difficult and hard man. And his mother was a sweet lady, but she had a very different moral compass than his father. He went to Newport Harbor High School, and he was a power lifter and a track star. He was being groomed to go to the Olympics. He did Junior Olympics and at least was hoping to try out for the Olympics, and he was supposed to go to a powerlifting meet, and the athletic director gave him the wrong times of the meet, and he ended up not qualifying. And he had 4 scholarship offers from 4 Ivy League schools, and the same day that he didn't qualify, they were all rescinded. And he said, well, what's the point? And he had already been kind of a high school party boy, but he started doing more of that, and then it wasn't just sort of your garden variety party stuff. It got into deeper drugs and other things. And then he started hanging out with his father, the biker. And his father, he said, I looked at him as a man that people respected. But he goes, I came to realize that they didn't respect him. They were terrified of him because he was a man of violence. And so his respect was actually fear and also taking from people rather than asking, manipulating people to get what you want, being a chameleon in every situation so that you can use weaker people as the strong. And he said, I did all of that. He goes, I'm one of these people who's afflicted with a very difficult condition. He goes, I'm enormously insecure, which means I think you're all better than I am. But I also have a huge ego, so I think I'm smarter than you are. And he goes, you put those two things together. He goes, it's such a toxic combination. He goes, that's why I was taking all the substances I was taking. He was in and out of jails, in and out of prisons, and he appeared before a judge, and the judge said, look, it's kind of like last strike time. It's either that or I'm going to put you in a rehab program. This is sort of your last shot. And he goes, I'll do the rehab thing. It wasn't the first time he had been in recovery. And he went to this meeting, and he just goes, oh. He says, the people here are so lame and so weak. Look at them, smiling and talking about their religion stuff. And he's like, okay. He goes, I can do it. I'll just put a face on, and they'll look like I'm one of them, blah, 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 blah. And he goes, a skinhead got up, and the skinhead said, if you want to be happy, why aren't you doing what the happy people do? Meaning the people that have joy, the people that seem to have found something that you're looking for. And he goes, that really struck with me, he said. I really started thinking about that. And then he said a group of people in this recovery group started going to a little church in Costa Mesa. And it was filled with bikers and people in recovery and drug addicts and so on. And he and his wife, they had actually met in a recovery group together. She actually sings in our choir. And a friend of theirs showed up, and she had a cast on her hand because her boyfriend had beat her up and broken one of her fingers. And the boyfriend goes to this church that he was going to go to. So he says, this is perfect. He goes, I'll go to the church, I'll beat the guy up in the parking lot, and then I'll go to church and just see what this Jesus thing's about. He goes, this is going to be great, 2 for 1, he said. I can thump the guy in the parking lot, and then I can go in. And he goes, the guy didn't show up for church, but I did. And he goes, as soon as the pastor started talking, I was hit by the Jesus bus. And he goes, my testimony to you is I am a destroyer. I am a violent man. I am a selfish man. I mean, he said all of this right here. He actually told us a story about something he did with methamphetamine that was, I think, truly shocking to people in the congregation. But it was all done in the spirit of, but I'm telling you this because I've been redeemed. Because Jesus found me. Jesus showed me grace. Jesus took my heart of stone and gave me a heart of flesh. And I went from jail to Jerusalem. And he goes, literally, my wife and I went to Jerusalem with her. We traveled in the Holy Land. We got married or did like a reaffirmation of our vows. And he goes, and I want to let you know it was important for me to be able to share it to this congregation, because he goes, I love being part of this church, being part of this community of people. He goes, we've been in a lot of churches, but there's something about this place and the sanctity of this place that we're so happy we belong here. And then I was in my robe, and he goes, and I was going to ask Pastor for one of his dresses today, and I said, I told you I have one, Shane. We have a whole closet full of these. And when he came out of the church, actually someone came out of church out of the first service, and he said, you know what, Pastor? He said, that was the best sermon you've ever given. And I go, I didn't give the sermon today. He goes, I know. He said, I know. And yeah, and Shane's a big guy. He's still a very strong guy. He actually has a tree trimming business. He actually was, some of you were his clients before he started coming to the church. He actually just trimmed the trees for our preschool. And, but he goes, I've told people this story a lot, but I haven't told a group of people like the people at the church, he said. He goes, if they were bikers or convicts, he goes, that would be easy. He goes, I'm talking to the church people. So he goes, I don't know if I should imagine them naked or if I should imagine myself naked, So when he came out today, I said, well, you did. It was a very powerful testimony. We'll actually have a copy of it. I've asked him if we can share it in our email. I go, so who did you imagine naked? He goes, I just forgot. He goes, I guess everybody was naked, It's important that we had that moment, and I hope it's not the last, because when the prophet Jeremiah in today's reading talks about shepherding, the work of the shepherd is you care for the flock, but you only care for the flock by taking care of the individual sheep. The health of the flock is only measured by the wellness of the aggregate health of the sheep. And so God is very intent on ruling each of us by shepherding us. You'll notice, God didn't say to Jeremiah, I'm going to raise for you new kings, I'm going to raise for you new kings, I'm going to raise for you better politicians, I'm going to raise for you better legislators and judges. God says, I'm going to give you real shepherds. And this is one of the anxieties that the Bible had, is the people went to God and they go, we want a king. And God goes, no, you don't. Because the tendency of human beings to try and grab power, to suppress people through fear by using violence to coerce, and do it at the level of a state, it's almost a universal temptation to wrestle power. And God goes, you already have me. This is the whole book of Samuel. This is actually why God introduces the office of prophets from Samuel all the way to John the Baptist, is we need some counterbalance to all the people who think that they're God on earth, because they're not. And then the prophet goes, yeah, you're saying that, but here's actually the truth. And so in the book of Samuel, God tells them, you don't want a king, you have me, I'm shepherding you. And they're like, come on, God, like all the other nations have kings, please. It's almost like they wanted an iPhone, but they wanted like a fourth grader wanting an iPhone. Please, everyone has one. And then God goes, fine. This is sometimes God's judgment is to give you exactly what you want, even though God's told you no. And it's like, if you want to do that, you can do that, but I'm telling you, do not do that. It will not end well for you. Okay, you say that, but maybe I'll be the one person it works out for. Now, it doesn't mean that God will abandon us. God will shepherd us, and God will come and find the lost sheep. But that shepherding image and the prophetic image is the counterbalance to a tendency toward a kind of totalitarian impulse of control. We need to control people. We need to control what they're doing, tell them what to do, tell them when to do it, tell them how to do it, rather than living free. Remember, when God set the slaves of Egypt free, they were like, who are we supposed to serve now? He goes, you're not serving anyone, you're free. You belong to me, we're going to get married. That's the image God uses, you're free. And they're like, yeah, but tell us what to do. You're free. And then it says they start having nostalgia for their time in slavery, because they were so threatened by the possibility that their nature restored by God was freedom, that they wanted to subvert it into something else. Even religious communities can become communities of control because people don't want to live out the gospel gift of freedom. That's what Paul said. For freedom, Christ has set you free. And they're like, to do what? Free to do what? To be free. You're free. Part of the dignity of your nature, part of being restored by the grace of Christ, is to be shepherded by a good shepherd, a good ruler, who wants you to just be yourself. Be fully yourself. Become the fullest version of yourself in freedom, and you will not have to be coerced, you will not have to be threatened, you will not have to have someone beat you up in the parking lot at church. You can live free. This is what God's rule is. And this is why Jesus is constantly critiquing in the Gospels what he calls lording over them, the authority like the Gentiles. And that lording of authority like the Gentiles is to say that God gave us the calling of lordship, the calling of rule, like even at the beginning of creation. We use the word dominion. It is dominion God's given us. But God did not give us these gifts of authority to use and abuse. God gave us these gifts to serve. Jesus himself, who serves freely. Jesus, who has every authority in the world, and yet he chooses to wash the feet, for example. I had told you last Sunday, someone who sat actually right where the Bruners are sitting, he used to sit right near them when he was able to come, and Bill Ridenauer, who died this week on Tuesday. And we had gone and said goodbye to him, because he was sort of non-responsive. He'd gotten to a point where he was non-responsive. And then Monday morning, before Bible study, his nurse called. And she called from his phone, and I said, well, I know he's not calling. So I thought, oh, they're probably calling to say he died. And she called and she said, he woke up this morning. He wants to go to church. He's trying to get out of bed. Sort of this moment of terminal lucidity. He wants to get out of bed. He wants to go to church. So I said, well, we'll bring church to him. So we went over to his house, and we had communion together. And actually, before communion, they'd poured him a warm Stella Artois that they sort of fed him with a syringe. Not the whole bottle, just a syringe of warm beer. He was happy. He grew up on a farm. He didn't expect much, just some. But we sat with him, we prayed with him, and the words that the thief offered on the cross are the words we sing over him. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. That image of Jesus on the cross with the sign that says, this is the King of the Jews, is the perfect example of both of the abuse of power, but also the redemption of that abuse. It's the same redemption that Shane was talking about at the first service. He was someone who abused a lot of things. He abused people, he abused substances, he abused himself. There was a lot of abuse and violence in his life until he was redeemed. And in that redemption, and in that meeting the heart of Jesus, in being reformed and restored, he experienced the gift of being shepherded, not ruled over, but served and shepherded so that he could come to a new beginning with God in Christ. And so this is one way we read the Bible too, because if you remember, we were doing our Jeremiah Bible study, and one of the few times the Bible study was ever revolted after several months of Jeremiah going, please, no more Jeremiah, it's so depressing. Can we just have one happy moment? I go, well, 16 chapters from now, there's one happy verse, They didn't want to wait that long, which I understand. We got enough of Jeremiah. They got the flavor of Jeremiah. But there's some weird verses in the Bible. Like people, you hear that all the time. There are pastors who preach on weird stuff all the time. But we don't do that here because the only way you can really read the Bible is through the heart of our crucified King. And the crucifixion is a vital part of our interpretation. And it's not even just through the heart of our crucified King, it's through the heart of crucified love. When you read the Bible, when you look at how to treat other people, when you look at living in the world, when you live in a world where there are people who are willing to use violence, coercion, the state, surveillance, whatever they're going to use to try and control, we have a very different picture, which is we look through the crucified heart of Jesus, and if it doesn't match with that love or doesn't seem to resonate with that love, we either have to be cautious around it or reject it. And this is our ethic. This is how we live. This is what it means to say Christ is the King, and it is a subversion of every government, authority, elected official, dictator, anybody who would use things like crucifixion to shut people up, to change human behavior, to make people afraid. God went to that place and broke its power so that we could live freely and that we can be a people of hope. And that's really what it is to be here at this church, to belong here. That's why Shane and his family have found a place here, to be part of this community that gathers itself around the message of grace and then carries that message into the world. We had a number of people. They were a little bit rain-bound. We were giving away some turkeys this week. The police department called us and said, we have turkeys to give away. And of course, you have people to give them to. Sure we do. Can we find 30 people to give turkey? So then they brought 40 turkeys, so we ended up with more turkey. But, because we have a relationship at the school, up the street, and some other places, we were able to find people, and then the rain came. It was, it was a thing. But one of the people who got one of the turkeys did not come on the day that we were here, and they came on Friday. And this was the mom whose son had been murdered at the gas station in Pico Rivera. If you remember them, we helped them when they were homeless. And she was working nights and then would take the kids to school and sleep in the car. And so we got them in a hotel. Then they went into housing. Then she took two of her kids to work. One of them got murdered in just a horrible botched robbery at a gas station. And you'll remember when that happened, we said, her life, what will her life be like after that act of violence? Well, as you can imagine, it's been really hard for her because now she's trying to keep living, keep working, but with this huge wound, a mother's heart who's watched her son get murdered, just like Mary, the mother of Jesus, saw her son get murdered. And so she came, and she got a turkey, and she got a check. Because of your generosity, actually, Michelle sat with her. Michelle ministered to her, talked to her, offered her comfort and support. What has it been like for you? How's your family doing? Are you able to work? And you can imagine she's not doing that great. She literally saw her son get murdered before her eyes. And now she's like, how do I keep my housing? How do I find my work? But she came here and got just a moment of grace, a moment of hope, a moment of life. And this is precisely what we're saying, is that it's not just for the world in which we live, it's for the promise that the power of death is not going to have power over us. One of the people in first service was crying because she was just told that her husband's coming to the end of his life. And that was not news they were expecting to hear. And when we were gathering at Bill Ridenour's bed singing, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom, we weren't expecting to be there. But we can go into those moments, into the valley of the shadow of death, and bring the light of Christ, the light of resurrection, and know that this is the truest thing about the world. So when Shane walked from there and then sat down, I just read the verse from Colossians that you heard Steve read earlier, which is, if you want to know what it looks like when God takes someone from darkness and leads them into his kingdom of light, you can take a look at a person like Shane, a person like me, a person like you. This is what it looks like for Jesus not just to be the king, but to be our king, to be our Redeemer. Amen.